I'm tired of hearing about these motherfuckers.
It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. And if you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness, it's what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do is the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am gonna pick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
The island of knowledge and the shoreline of ignorance. What does that mean? What am I talking about? Well, how does that relate to the University of Georgia and the football season for 2023? Welcome back in, everybody, to this episode of How About That WALTHOUR. We're going to take a quick second. We're going to look back at last week. We're going to look ahead to next week. But I really want to sort of frame the conversation this week coming off of week 1 when we spent 7 months in talking season. That's all we had to go on. What we had seen, what we were hearing, what we thought we would see here in 2023. Talking season is over. They kick the ball off. And immediately, everyone jumps into overreaction season. They see 1 quarter of action. And then they decide how the rest of the season is going to go. That's not what we're about. That's not how we do it. That's not how we view the game or this team. No, we take a little bit wider view, a little bit slower. Some people like it, some people don't. That's okay. But that's the way it makes the most sense. And 9 times out of 10, that's the most prudent way to look at it. So that's what we're going to do tonight. The island of knowledge and the shore of ignorance. We live on an island surrounded by a sea of ignorance. As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. Now, this is a quote from John Archibald Wheeler. And I don't remember exactly where I heard it the first time, but it never left me because there's so much truth in it, especially when you're talking about football and a team and a season. Any football team, any season. The same sort of idea applies. You would think that as our knowledge grows, our ignorance would become less. And on an absolute basis, I mean, that's absolutely true. But with that increased knowledge, we paradoxically become more ignorant of what we don't know. And it becomes ever clearer to us as our island grows and that shoreline lengthens, just how much is out there that we don't know. And that's what we're talking about. And I think when you think about a game 1, a week 1 in a college football season, this idea fits perfectly. When we were going into the game, we had spring practice, G-Day. We had reports from fall camp. We had off-season rumor and scuttlebutt. And we had what we saw on the field from players last season as we formulated what we thought 2023 was going to be and what it was going to look like. Now, coming out of this game against Tennessee Martin, there were a lot of people who had a lot of rash, quick decisions. Like I said, that's not how I operate. What I saw in Sanford Stadium and in Athens this past weekend was a team that had a new quarterback, didn't have either of its starting running backs, didn't have its top 2 receivers available to it at the wide receiver position, new offensive lineman. That's what I saw on offense. I saw a new kicker. I saw a new kickoff specialist I saw a bunch of young players on those special teams units. On defense, I saw pretty much what I thought I was going to see, which is a really good defense that's really talented. And I walked away feeling very hopeful about what we're going to see from that defense, hopeful that they're actually going to back up what I've said all offseason, which is that this year's defense, in the end, might be better than last year's defense, even if it's just statistically. Because we saw several young players get quality snaps this past Saturday at every level of the defense. Middle linebacker, defensive line, corner. They wouldn't be out there and playing very well. Hell, they damn near pitched a shutout with most of the second and third string playing most of the second half. Still not sure that guy was in the back of the end zone there. So I'm not too concerned about the defense. I feel really good about that defense. Now, with that said, what did I start this with? That's what we thought we knew. Then we have what we saw. So I feel good about the defense, but I also feel good about the offense. I have every confidence that as these guys get more game reps, which cannot be duplicated in any other scenario, I think they're going to get that rhythm. I think any worries you might have about Carson Beck and his rhythm in the first quarter or anything like that you should let those go, because he proved over the rest of his time in the game that he worked through that, started to find his rhythm a little bit. And when he gets guys like Ladd McConkey back, when he gets Rosemy Jack-Saint back on the field with him, I think all that's going to sort itself out. Along the offensive line, I saw some inconsistencies, especially from the younger players, but I did like what I saw. I like what I think they can become. Ernest Green did some really nice things in his first start at the University of Georgia. So I feel good, but I know they can be better. And I trust and I believe that they will be, because I know they're going to be coached up on it. What was it Nolan Smith used to say all the time? We got to go to the doctor, got to check that film, get out there, correct our mistakes, and get it right. I feel good that that's going to happen along that offensive line. The running backs, even though the top two guys that are available to play didn't play much, they did some good things. I don't say that anybody, broke the mold, showed us something that we weren't necessarily expecting, but they ran hard. They did a good job. Cash caught the ball out of the backfield. Rod picked up the yards that were blocked for him. So we get those older guys back in there. We get a little bit more rhythm, a little continuity for a couple of weeks in a row, and we're going to see something different. So on the whole, I saw week one Georgia football game against a non-SEC opponent look pretty much like I expected a week one Georgia football game against a non-SEC opponent to look. So, color me excited football is back and ready to watch this team grow. The island of knowledge and the shore of ignorance. You can apply that to any position. You can apply it to the team as a whole and to any position. So we know that we had some depth questions at running back going into the game. We got some answers, and our island of knowledge grew about who would play and how they would use them and stuff like that. And then we started to feel that uncomfortableness of our ignorance of that length of shoreline growing and our ignorance growing as well. Because we're like, we believe these guys are going to take that next step and find their role in the offense, but we have to see it, and that causes uneasiness. It's completely normal. We should all question a few things. I would just say pump the brakes if you're one of those people who are jumping off the bridge after week 1. So I'm not concerned about it. Truly, I'm not. I think you should feel pretty good about what we saw. And I think with a good Ball State team rolling in there, and I know you can raise your eyebrows if you want to, but I watched this team against Kentucky, a team that I think pretty highly of, play very, very well in that first half in Lexington, and we're up on the Wildcats in the second quarter. When we play Ball State, it's going to look like Georgia playing Georgia. I, of course, don't mean in the personnel. I mean in the way they go about it, right? They're a pro-style offense, the things they're going to try to do on defense. They have a couple of good players. So their tight ends are good. The safety's good. This is a decent Ball State team that's rolling in here out of the MAC. Georgia better be ready to play, and I believe that they will. We've heard early reports this week from practice that practice has been very good on the heels of your first game. You come back out there, go to the doctor, hit the practice field, get a lot of energy, a lot of excitement going, take care of your business, get ready to take on that next opponent. And that's the thing. That's the thing that we have to remember, is that no team is the same year to year. It's a different group of people in every way. Even the people that are the same are different. And they're going to have to figure it out as they go. But when you put that nameless and faceless tag on whoever's showing up on Saturday to play, then your work is not impacted as you get ready to play that game. And I fully believe that's what's going to happen. So there's the old cliche, but you don't see more growth in a football team than what you see from week 1 to week 2. And in a lot of ways, that's absolutely true. But if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of areas in which this Georgia football team are going to be better. They should be better in special teams. They have the players to be more dynamic, to be more impactful. So I hope that we see that against Ball State. They have the ability to be better in the run game against a defense that's not going to sell the farm to shut down that run game. They're going to be better just because they have experience now of having seen live fire, in front of 90,000. So they're going to be better there. Same for Carson. He's gotten past his butterflies. It's ready to go. Let's go get this done. He's going to get Rosemary-Jack-Saint back this week, which is going to make a big difference. I'm not so sure we're going to see Ladd this week. If I had to bet, I would say no. He wants to play, but why would you risk him with South Carolina looming the next week? So regardless of what you think or what you thought in the moment about what you saw from these dogs, again, I saw just about exactly what I expected to see. Regardless of what you think or thought, the Georgia Bulldogs have won 18 straight games. They're 1-0 this year. You're not the LSU Tigers. You're not Clemson. Things could be much, much worse. These are first world problems if you're a Georgia Bulldog and you're feeling some stress right now. But this is where my calming voice is going to tell you there's no reason to be concerned. That anxiety that you feel, that little voice in your head, it's a liar. These dogs are doing just fine. Yes, our island of knowledge will continue to grow week after week as we get deeper into the season. We're going to learn more about these younger players as we get to see them and the skill sets that they have and how they might be used in these various schemes that the dogs are going to run. We're going to learn more about what Carson does when the game's a little bit tighter and he makes a mistake. We're going to learn more about what that run game looks like when you have your top two backs toting the rock. And we will inevitably learn that there's much that we don't know. But that's why we watch the games. That's why it's fun. That's why it's interesting. That's why we are all so very invested. So the island of knowledge and the shore of ignorance. Just keep that with you. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to think about as we move through the season. Because again, This is not something that is just this team, just this season. You can apply this in life. And it's a wonderful way to help you keep perspective on the things that you see, especially when you're greatly invested in them. I thought it was a perfect way to talk about week 1 this week. So I was feeling pretty good about it. And Coach had a lot to say about week 1. And I mean, it wasn't the reason I chose this theme to talk about this week. But just yesterday, Coach Kirby Smart essentially said exactly what I have just been saying to you.
I don't know what we learned last year in that Oregon game where almost everything went our way offensively, and then this year everything almost went our way defensively. Obviously, 2 very different opponents. I'm not comparing the 2 opponents, but I'm comparing what I know about our team. I don't, because in each of those years there were games immediately after that we had question marks, and I think you're always going to have question marks. I mean, nobody says you got to be the best team after week 1.
Oh, I love that. Nobody says you got to be the best team after week 1. The preseason rankings, right? I mean, we all love to be ranked number 1. Let's not lie. But they don't mean anything. I mean, the football season is a journey. We know that they have good talent in Athens. We know that we have good coaching staff. We know that they have a pedigree of winning. We know they have a process in place. But it's like I said just a minute ago about that nameless, faceless opponent. Yes, they're focusing in game planning for Ball State. But at the very same time, it doesn't matter who they're playing. They're going to go out there and try to get better, because you heard him. The goal is not to be the best team week 1. He was asked in that question about, did you learn anything more about your team facing an opponent like UT Martin this week than you did last year facing an opponent like Oregon, or the year before facing an opponent like Clemson? And he clearly tells you, no, I don't think I did. Now, I would add in, now he had just come off the practice field. He's taking rapid fire questions. I'm going to add in here, take just a little bit of, license here and say that if he had the opportunity to sit down, think about that question before he answered it, he might say something along the lines of exactly what he said, but throw in something like, well, I learned what my team is going to do when they're tested. So I guess the closest you would come to that might be that Clemson game 2 years ago when it's really tight late and you make a big play, you get the win. You learn about resilience, you learn about character, those sorts of things. Maybe he would mention that if the game were a little bit closer, but it certainly wasn't close last year against Oregon. It wasn't close this year against UT Martin. And he was making the point that even after those games where things looked really good to just, the casual eye, there was still a lot that needed to be worked on, a lot that needed to be corrected. So he's telling us, does it really matter who you play? When you come out of the game, you're still going to have questions, because just like our island of knowledge is growing and our shoreline of ignorance is expanding, so are those of the coaches. I mean, yes, they see these players every day, but you don't see them in game environments until you do. And that's what he's referring to there. There's always questions. There's always something to address, something to work on, because they're in pursuit of that nameless, faceless opponent, but they are focused on the process. And that process is what puts Georgia in the position that they're in right now, where they have won 18 consecutive games. Seems to be working out pretty good so far. Now, being an old defensive lineman, one of the areas that I've talked about a lot in this offseason has been this defense and how good I think it could be. I even went so far as to say, based on the preseason reports and what we know of these players and how Kirby and the staff like to use them, that the potential exists for Georgia to end up with 3 defensive All-Americans, at least 3, one at every level of the defense, the defensive line, a linebacker, and then someone from the secondary. Clearly, I'm on record as saying that. I think very highly of this unit and the players on it. But even with all of that, and even based on everything I've said all off season about the defensive line in particular, not the edge guys, my shoreline of ignorance grew a little bit in the days following the game against UT Martin around that position specifically, around the defensive line, because when you think about the issues that Georgia might have heading into this year, they're the ones that have gotten all the attention, like running back depth, tight end depth, new faces on the offensive line, stuff like that, stuff, a new quarterback. Those were the marquee headlines of the offseason. But there was one that kind of snuck under the radar. Along that defensive line, they have bodies. They're young, but they have bodies, especially at the defensive tackle position. But one of the positions that they don't have bodies is that defensive end, like a 5 technique, what Kirby refers to as the big end. So you might have a guy on one side that's a bit more of a pass rusher, right? A guy that might drop back and play in space a little bit. A guy who might pick up a back out of the backfield or occasionally be forced to cover a tight end or something like that. Then you have on the other side a bigger back, a bigger defensive end, somebody who's going to strike a blocker, who's going to set an edge, who's going to stuff that run game. That's where they don't really have the bodies. Now, as I looked at the roster, that's something that I had negated I didn't see it. I was just looking at the defensive line as a unit. I didn't break it out specifically by position. That's why the lack of numbers didn't stick out to me. But it's something that Kirby is recruiting towards, is very aware of, and is frankly concerned about. Now, in my talk about the defensive line, I did point out that I think there are some tremendous football players there. They're just names that not everybody's going to know. Nazir Stackhouse is one. TRAMEL WALTHOUR is another one. Warren Brinson, that's another guy. You may not know those names, but they're really good football players. And to the point I was just making about depth at the defensive end position, the larger end position, well, that's where TRAMEL WALTHOUR plays. Now, you may or may not be aware that he started, I believe it was 15 games for the Georgia Bulldogs last year in their undefeated season at defensive end. I don't know if many of you guys would be able to have told me that. He's an invaluable part of what they do. And he's at a position of need. So when TRAMEL decided to come back to Athens this season, that was a big deal that nobody paid attention to. Thankfully, at the press conference yesterday, somebody asked Kirby about him because TRAMEL stepped up to the podium at one point and had some meeting time with the reporters. And somebody asked Kirby what he thought about TRAMEL and what he's done for the University of Georgia.
Yeah, it's been huge for us because look at the situation we've been in. That's a position that we're probably the thinnest on our entire team, more so than running back and tight end is the defensive, what I call the big end. We've got defensive tackles, but we have a deficiency there. And with Ty has been injured back and forth. Michael has been out almost all camp. I mean, where we would be without TRAMEL, we would be forced to play undersized outside backers at that position. And TRAMEL's given us great leadership and great consistency.
See, it's those players that you don't think about, that you don't hear about, that you don't necessarily even know about, that are the glue of what makes a fantastic defense and a wonderful team hold together. They're the very fabric of what makes Georgia good. That is TRAMEL WALTHOUR. I mean, Kirby's telling us there, he's like, listen, if TRAMEL hadn't stayed healthy, we would be looking like a Pac-12 team out here. Now, granted, Georgia's players, might be more talented, but you would have an undersized outside linebacker type putting his hand in the ground, trying to set that edge in the run game consistently. More often than not, when you're facing linemen in the SEC that are around 300 pounds, that's not going to go well for you. So the depth at that position is crucial for Georgia. So when we talk about recruiting and we talk about the kinds of bodies and the type of player that Kirby and the staff are bringing in, keep stuff like this in mind, because it really matters, right? It really tells the story about whether or not you're going to be a good team or a team that has that quality depth that's going to allow you to become a great team. As your island of knowledge grows, right? As you learn more about your squad and you figure out who can play where and what combinations and things like that. So I thought that was a wonderful point. And again, what I want to help you do is not just watch the game. I want to help you see the game. And it's stuff like this that allows you to do that. It's sometimes lost on casual fans because you just see the red and the black and the G on the helmet, and one body is the same as the next body, barring a few superstar exceptions. But it's just not the case. All of these players are tremendous football players who are giving their all to help make Georgia the very best that they can be. And I, for one, am grateful to those guys for doing that hard work, because that is what allows us as fans to enjoy the season and have the kind of fun that we have. So I really appreciated it when they gave Coach an opportunity to speak on a player like TRAMEL, because that's the kind of guy that deserves a little spotlight occasionally for what he's meant to the program. So just keep your eye on him the rest of the year and just watch how valuable he is in the run game, especially the way he plays that run game. We're going to see this. We're going to see it against Ball State, because one of the things against UT Martin is they were getting the ball out so fast that you didn't have an opportunity, or at least not many, to really get after the quarterback in the sack numbers. And in the run game, the Dogs did a pretty good job against the back, but the quarterback run hurt them a little bit. And that speaks to a little bit of inconsistency along those edges, like we were just talking about. But also, it was just a different kind of offense, right? Like, those weren't necessarily designed runs. Some of them were in the moment runs where that edge didn't get set and the guy was able to get outside. When we look at Ball State, they are going to have a little bit more conventional feel to what it is they do, and that you're going to have a few more 5-step, 7-step drops. They're going to try to throw the ball down the field, and we're going to learn a lot. Our island of knowledge is going to grow this week, because we're actually going to get to see Javon Bullard take some action down the deep middle if Ball State tries to throw the ball, which is something that UT Martin didn't really do. They didn't try to stretch the field. Ball State will. They're going to try to hit the seams with those tight ends and things like that, and Bullard's going to have to make adjustments in game from the safety position against deep balls for the first time, which is not really something we saw against UT Martin. So we're going to learn a little bit about Bullard. We're going to learn more about this defensive line and whether they can create havoc and get pressure in the pass game. We're going to learn whether they can hold up against the run in a more conventional run game. And when I say conventional, I don't mean that UT Martin ran some gimmick offense. I'm just saying that UT Martin knew that they were outmanned, literally, like by definition. Georgia had bigger players, stronger, type athletes. So they weren't going to beat their head against the wall. They were going to do what gave them the best chance to win, which is sell out in the run game, and then force Georgia to execute, blocking in the pass game, making a good read, making a good throw, making a good catch. And then if you flip that around, they were going to try to get the ball out of their quarterback's hands quickly before Georgia could just wreck everything with those athletes that they have at the edge position and along the defensive line. Miami of Ohio, though, they stand in, they pride themselves on being a bit more physical. They're going to want to stand in there and mix it up a little. So we're going to learn. We're going to learn what Georgia can do against a more conventional run game, what this edition of the Dogs can do against a more conventional run game. And I for one, am very much looking forward to seeing it. It'll be interesting to see how quickly the Dogs start this week. One of the things that I really felt good about last week was, regardless of whatever you say about how they ultimately move the ball in the first quarter or put points on the board in the first half or anything like that, whatever your measure of a good first half was, the thing that made me feel really good was that throughout the game, what you didn't see was a team that looked undisciplined. You didn't see a team that didn't know how to get lined up. Florida. You didn't see a bunch of bonehead mental mistakes. You did not see a lack of effort, which, of course, I didn't expect to see from this team. The mechanization of making it work, right? Executing the game play by play looked good for Georgia, which was one of the things I said I wanted to see in game one. They passed that with flying colors. So the rest of that stuff will work itself out through repetition, comfort, coaching, all of those things. So heading into Ball State after having taken on UT Martin, I feel pretty good about this Georgia Bulldogs football team. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can grow into, what they can become. Now, I mentioned earlier that the havoc rate this week against UT Martin was low. And by havoc rate, I mean, could they affect the quarterback? Did they first force turnovers, right? Did you get tackles for loss? Did you get pass breakups? That sort of stuff. Again, based on what UT Martin was trying to do and how they executed their game plan, the opportunities were not vast for the Dogs to have big havoc numbers this week. But with that said, I think it's going to change moving forward. And because we didn't see those big numbers, Coach was asked about that in his press conference yesterday. He was asked about, A, are you worried that you didn't see big numbers? His answer is no. No suspense there, and he explained why, very, very much along the lines of what I just said. And then the second part of that question was, is this used against you negatively in recruiting? If you don't have a guy who's lining up and getting 10 sacks a season, a guy that you know has the potential but isn't getting the numbers, is that something that other schools use against you when you're going after those top tier players? And Kirby, in true Kirby form, had like the best mic drop moment of his entire press conference so far this week. Who knows? We may see him again. He may offer us something even better. But so far, this one was pretty doggone good.
Well, we usually fix that when we show them how many we have drafted and that it's silenced. Because we put Trevon Sachs up there and say he went number 1 overall. We put Devontae's up there and say he went in the first round. We put Quay's up there. We put Nolan's up there. We put Jordan Davis's, and then they don't say anything.
They don't say anything. What can you say, man, when you're cranking out first-round draft picks like that? Because it's like Kirby has said on more than one occasion. You don't get drafted by playing. You get drafted by playing well. How do you play well when you get the opportunity? Well, That means that you have bought into the grind and the work, the process of going to practice every day, of getting better, of improving your game and doing all those sorts of things. So when another team is like, well, don't go to Georgia, they don't rush the passer, you're never going to make the NFL that way. Well, you just heard what Kirby said. He's like, nope, that's just not true. Check it out. We've got the proof. We've got the receipts, and we're sharing them with you right now. So I thought that was really good. I thought Kirby laid it out there pretty doggone well. When somebody wants to come at him with some negative recruiting, I thought he answered the bell right there. Now, we've kind of touched on UT Martin, sort of cleaned up what was left over there, and we've looked ahead to Ball State just a little bit. But one of the things that I didn't mention directly, but I wanted to mention now, is for as much talk as there was coming out of the game about Georgia not being sharp and not doing the things that maybe people were expecting them to do, it may have gotten lost on people that Georgia quarterbacks threw for 400 yards, 400, and 2 touchdowns through the air. And oh, by the way, Georgia won 48-7. That's a 41-point victory. So forgive me if the sky is falling people don't warrant much of my attention. And here's another little fact that proved itself out this weekend. The good people over at College Football Nerds took the opportunity following the Clemson game this weekend to point out that they lost as a direct result of their inability to generate explosive plays. Well, duh. Kirby's told anybody that'll listen for years that explosive plays, both made and given up, are the greater indicator of wins and losses than turnovers and time of possession. So if you're giving them up 20 yards, 40 yards at a time, and then you're not able to make them when you have the ball, you're going to lose. I know it seems a little silly to say that out loud, but it's just a fact. I mean, explosive plays tell the tale. This 400 yards that the Dogs quarterbacks threw for, there were some shots down the field. Seems like I remember a few of them. Carson Beck to Dominic Lovett. Brock Vandegrift to Ra Thomas. Carson Beck to Brock Bowers. Kendall Milton on a long run. Roderick Robinson on a long run. The Dogs' offense, despite what people might want to say, was explosive. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but the stats are going to make you out to be a liar if you're saying that it was not explosive. Stats don't care. They just want you to understand what's happening. Stats often lie, but these do not. And on the other side of that coin, Georgia's defense didn't allow a pass over 20 yards. When I think chunk play, that's what I think, a 20-yard play. Georgia's defense didn't give that up, which makes me feel really good about the direction that young defense is going in. I think they're only going to get better as the season goes along. Now, not only can you join us here on YouTube to take in the How About That Dogscast every week, but you can also hit us up. Say you can't make the live stream, no problem. Head on over to adamnbeast.com and check out the archives. You can see all the past episodes right there, conveniently located for you in one place. So the season rolls on. And we are making our way toward SEC play. It's going to be here before we know it. South Carolina's coming in next week. Not that we're looking ahead, but that is the kind of thing that we as fans can do. But I want to encourage you that we only get 12 weekends guaranteed every fall to watch the Silver Britches line it up and play a little college football. So don't take any of them for granted. Every opportunity you get to watch our dogs play, enjoy them. I saw a tweet today that just made my heart happy because it reminded me of my childhood. And it said, for just a second, allow yourself to think back to when you were a young football fan. You ran inside on a Saturday afternoon, you turned on the television, and the Bulldogs were on the screen. Just think about how happy that made your heart. Think about the joy that it brought you, that pure, unrefined happiness. Remember that feeling when we watch Georgia play, friends, because yes, we all have high expectations for this team. Yes, we want to see them play their very best. But I think we can rest assured that they are working to improve in that never-ending pursuit of the perfect game. Because as they learn more about their team, as their island of knowledge grows, so too will their shoreline of ignorance. But they're chasing it, and they're working hard every day. And we get to come along for the ride and watch this team come together and grow. And Ball State this week is another opportunity to do that. I really do think that this is going to be a fun game to watch. I think we're going to see our team take a step forward. I think we're going to see new faces that didn't get to play a lot last week are going to return to the field this week. We're going to see what impact that has on the game. I'm excited to see how it unfolds. And I'm very interested to see just how much, I don't know if sharper is the right word, because they were pretty sharp on the whole against UT Martin, but whether or not they just level up. They have that saying of getting 1% better every day. I want to see if they're 7% better when we see them against Ball State on Saturday than they were against UT Martin this past Saturday. That's why we watch. That's why it's fun. That's where the drama in the sport comes from. Thank you so much for showing up for this edition of How About That Dogs Cast. Until next week, go Dogs.
So how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.